he basically said, "Okay, guys, it's feedback time. I can take it. Speak now or forever hold your peace." And one by one, the young people started sharing their views on his sermon or feedback. So they would say things like,
Hello, I'm Edra,
and I'm Yan Ping,
and this is Teo-logy podcast.
and welcome to a brand new set.
We're just testing it out, we're just experimenting. I think the issue is whether it is worth the setup and set down in this kind of setting lah. Yeah. We have also recently sourced our own condenser mics, so we'll see whether that could improve the listening quality of the audio. Yeah. So anyway, there's something I want to briefly rant to you today. Okay? So as you know, I've come from a Pentecostal church, a charismatic church all my life. But however, my theological differences has always been a mixed bag, a rojak, right? So the interesting thing is, every time I go around and they ask, "Oh, so now that you're in Johor, which church you're attending?" And I just tell them that, "Oh, we're attending this church." And then they'll say, "Oh, so which church were you from? Or what denomination were you from?" And I'll say, "Oh yeah, I was in a Pentecostal church." And they'll say stuff like, "Oh, then this church will bore you." Or, "Then why aren't you at this other charismatic church?" As if, right, the instant they hear which denomination, they have this quick need to have to categorize you. Yeah, so what are some of your thoughts for that? Because for me, it's a bit off-putting lah, a bit.
I think humans in general are quite creatures of habit, so we flock to the same kind of experience that we are very used to, and I think it's quite natural for people to assume that would be something that you would gravitate to. But of course, there are also people that certain things about a church is a non-negotiable, so that could be what was going on.
Yeah, so I'm thinking that one of the reasons why it is off-putting for me is because my context is more inter-D, right? So there are certain key values, but secondary church distinctive practices may not matter as much to me, which actually brings us to this segue on how we choose a church. Yeah. So, maybe you have anything to add, or not just share the flow we have for today?
Yeah, I think in choosing church, we'll share some of our experiences. So the first fun observation that I made and will share is, how do you get into a community effectively? And then the second one would be just some quick sharing on the different churches that we have experienced in Johor and the highlights from them. And then we'll talk about the 3 principles that we use in choosing church.
Yeah, and I think before we even dive in, right, maybe a quick disclaimer of what we mean when we say choosing church. Our flow and our metrics are very much on a personal level. We are not tackling the 9 marks of a healthy church. We are not gonna tackle and share our deep preferences of secondary doctrines. And what do I mean by that is, like, there are plenty of books if you want to read on this matter. And we are not brushing them off as unimportant. So, like, secondary doctrines are doctrines that do not pertain to the essentials of the gospel and how you are saved. Nonetheless, by understanding these secondary doctrines, they do matter in how you witness and how you live out the gospel. And so we will not be discussing, if you're thinking of whether we are cessationists or continuationists, on whether the gifts of the Spirit still work today. We're not going to discuss about the role of women. If you want that, will be in our other podcast, Malaysian Christian Talks, right? And we won't be discussing on the types of baptism and all that. That's not. What we're going to really discuss is our personal journey of what kind of church, how we chose to settle in a certain kind of church lah. Yeah. So with that, maybe you can start us off lah on your interesting fact.
Yeah. So, in my workplace, I do a lot of community visits, and whenever you go into a new community, you kind of need to figure out like how you want to, engage the community. And coming to Johor, and when we were visiting churches, it dawned upon me that it works quite similarly any community that you enter, you probably need to meet 3 people. Yeah. If you want to be very effective and if you want to get into the community very quickly. So, first person you want, and I'll share in the context of a church that we visited and how those 3 people actually played out. So the first person that you want to meet is someone who knows you and can recommend you to the community. Second person you want to meet is the person in the community who is the influencer who gives you the nod of approval. And once that person gives you the nod of approval, then it's almost as if like, oh, okay, everyone else in the community will accept you. But the third person that you want to meet is actually the person who operates things, who gets things moving. Because the person who gives you the nod of approval might just say yes, but you might not be able to actually get your work done or, get activities through. There is someone on the ground who actually, sort of does the dirty work, gets really on the ground, and that's the person you want to meet. So it was quite interesting because we went and visited this one church, and we knew one person in that church, but as we parked the car...
The operations person, right?
Yeah. As we parked the car, we got down from the car, and as we were walking towards the church, I said to Adjo, oh, is that XXX, the name of the person?
Yeah, then I saw his behind and I was like, that looks like, but why would he be here?
Yeah, because we were expecting this person to be in KL.
Yeah.
So this person is someone that we knew from KL.
And he's also my Greek lecturer.
It so happened for that week he was invited down to JB to speak.
At the particular church that we were going to visit. Yeah.
So when we saw him, we said hi, and he was like, oh, let me introduce you to the senior pastor.
Yeah.
And just like that, just walking through the door, we got introduced to, the person who gives you the nod of approval, right? The senior pastor. And because of that, we ended up having lunch with the senior pastor that day itself. So from the nod of approval, of course, we knew the operations person already, but I felt like that got conversations a lot easier. And then the operations person talks about, there are these things that we are working at, and this is something that you can come and help in and contribute, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So that was quite a fun experience going to that church. But how was your experience about the church itself?
So particularly the church, more charismatic in slant, I think one thing I appreciated was how they have these 2 eyes. It was intergenerational, and it was also international. And why do I find it cool is because, to me, I think every church should be intergenerational and not just one generation. Because discipleship goes through all ages at every phases. So I would appreciate if there is someone who's older than me who has been through enough to show me the real ropes and how to take the next step, while there's someone who's younger who would rely on me to just journey with them to hear on certain matters. So intergenerational really matters. So not a church that focuses on just one type of ministry, and every old people that comes in, for example, thinks, oh, we are bygones, we don't fit here, so hence we'll move to another church. So that the other one is international. It is what was cool is we saw Filipinos, we saw Nigerians, who else? Sabahan Sarawakans, and at the end of the service, they were just sitting down and just catching up at tables like normal, like as if there was no barriers whatsoever.
Yeah, it was very nice to see this old Chinese uncle sit with this young Nigerian student, and they're just like eating.
Yeah, just casually talking. And again, maybe this is all just from based on observation, right? And I think being international becomes one of the greatest physical expressions of what the unity of the church can look like, because they're gonna go and see the church, right? And say, if it's all Chinese, they say, oh yeah, this is a Chinese church. If it's all Indians, it's all Indian church. But when you see that, then you understand that everyone are one in Christ. And I think that church really displayed that fact. Other than the fact that it was also very, it was very established, it was steady, and everything was clear cut.
Warm and vibrant.
Yep. So that was that church lah. Yeah.
Which I guess we can then talk about the highlights of the churches that we've been to since we started on the first one. That was the highlight from that particular church.
Yeah, so then the next church we visited was a Methodist church. Yeah, perhaps you then can share your highlights as you observe.
Yeah, it was interesting. Service-wise was like any other church, Methodist church, but the cool part for us was we were invited for lunch after with the young people, and it so happened that day that the preacher on that day was the one who did ministry with the young people. So he went out together with the young people for lunch, and during lunch, he basically said, "Okay guys, it's feedback time. I can take it. Speak now or forever hold your peace." And one by one, the young people started sharing their views on his sermon or feedback. So they would say things like, I really found this part very edifying. It was a new perspective for me, but I felt like your application, I didn't see where it was coming from. Someone even gave a rating. It was a 6 out of 10. And that was really, really interesting for me, because I think feedback is something that can be quite rare in church, especially for sermon, or especially for common folk. Maybe within the church staff, they might do some inner feedback, but getting first-hand feedback from your young people about how the sermon just went, I thought that was a very beautiful culture. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would think as beautiful as it is, it's very tough on two reasons. And I'm just going to throw it out there for the listeners to also keep aware. So sometimes the person who preaches doesn't know how to take feedback. And it's tougher for a younger person to provide feedback. Because they will get offended, and by the way, preachers have a high tendency to get offended because they put in so much effort in preparation. I think the other one is, as you provide feedback, right? I know the goal is to be able to discern God's word rather than rely on the speaker, but sometimes it can hinge on to just pure intellectual stimulation. So I think that culture works in a community that trusts each other and they know each other. So any Tom, Dick and Harry that comes from the outside in will see this as very weird. Yeah.
You need to set certain norms in that culture so that people have an understanding what that feedback space is for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would concede that actually in a lot of other churches, such a culture is very lacking. Yeah, if I can provide feedback on the person's sermon for them to say, "Oh, thank you, I will look into it," or "Oh, by the way, Adjo, thank you for feedback, but I disagree with you on this point because so and so and so." That kind of conversations rarely do happen lah.
So, and you speak from a position where a lot of people have input into you, right? Given you feedback in the past.
That's also because I asked for it, ma. Yeah. This in terms of when I do preaching, I always get feedback. Kind of thing. So yeah.
It's a healthy practice. So what about the next church that we visited?
So the next church we see is also on it came from the AOG background. Yeah, AOG, their beginnings were AOG but now became independent. So one thing cool is the pastor there was really faithful, ongoing. At the morning we were able to have a conversation with him. But then towards the evening, he had to run the next service. So he was a go-getter because the needs were so great.
Yeah. He literally preaches for 3 language services.
Correct.
English, Mandarin, and
Bahasa. So that was really, really cool to see that level of faithfulness, and also implies that there is a great need where there is a lacking of churches or whatnot. But I think one of the highlights for me for this particular church is how accessible the people are. Yeah. One of them will message and says, "Hey, sit with us first and half an hour earlier so that we can just fellowship." Then after that, right, the pastors will make sure that we are connected to someone with some common background just to get the conversation going. And then after that, they say, "By the way, we're going for lunch. Would you want to join?" Yeah. And also not dinner. And then this particular week, they were so gung-ho that they decided after dinner they wanted to go for supper. And so we had the privilege of really spending the late afternoon all the way to 11 p.m. just talking, hearing testimonies, conversations from the pastor's wife, who is also a pastor, and people with them in different ministries, some full-time, and how they struggle and all that. And that level of fellowship I think there was one highlight. One highlight that I really appreciate, because for me, it's easy to become a professional Christian and to do churchy stuff. And what do I mean by that is, as a professional Christian, you know when to lift up your hands and raise down. You know when to say amen when the pastor says something, and you know when to say, I'll be praying for you, God bless you. And there was none of that. There was just casual talk. And then to do churchy stuff, right, is to make sure you come right on time on Sunday, you say the prayer before the sermon, you do that kind of thing. But this one had a lot of intentionality of, I want to know the person and I want to journey with the person. That was the feeling I got. And there were follow-ups. They say, oh, Andrew, we have live group at this also and that, we like to come. And okay, so I'm busy. I haven't visited their live group yet, the cell group yet. But when the time comes, I probably would. Because that was the kind of that was what was communicated to me, and I appreciated that.
Yeah.
So that was my highlight.
Nice people.
Yeah. So that was that. You got anything else to add on highlights?
Maybe one more church. Before we talk about the church that we actually settled in, we went to a very small family church, very traditional one, liturgical, which was something that I missed, and not too much to say about the church except that it was liturgical, which is something that I always appreciate. I feel like there is a lot of meaning and a lot of thought put into the words that people say. And for listeners who don't know what liturgical means, it's basically there's a lot of words and response from the person leading the service. So he would say some stuff and then the congregation would respond back, and usually it's all like on the screen for you or printed for you, so you just repeat it, and there's that kind of flow of service. I do appreciate that kind of structure because I feel like there usually is a lot of thought put into the words that are said, so that's something that I appreciate. The second thing I appreciated from that church was just faithful Bible teaching, and also that pastor in himself, he is very pastoral and he has been following up with you quite a lot.
Yeah. And I think I really appreciate that. I think also just to add on, right, I think intentional liturgy is one of the many ways to combat a consumeristic mindset in a church where I just come to receive. But a liturgy involves me to know that I am part of the church and I'm not relying just on the few key people, but we take part as I respond, you speak and all that lah. Yeah.
And it's not so emotionally driven.
Yeah.
Because a lot of things are like planned ahead of time.
So why not we slide into now sharing our three personal... So we distill it to three personal principles, and on how we decided, and we'll also give a brief explanation why these were the three principles that mattered to us lah. Yeah, but maybe why not you share it with the rest?
So obviously, based on the sharing of the experiences, there are a lot of highlights from different churches, right? And there are a lot of good churches across the board. And that sometimes makes it tricky on how are you going to choose a church. Or sometimes you could be in a place where there are no good churches at all, or you just feel like everything is lacking. But for us, or for me, you can add on, I hold on to three principles, and I also acknowledge that you probably won't find a church that hits all three well or perfectly. The first principle is faithful teaching of God's word, the Bible. Some people also classify, correct doctrine under that category. Second, for me, is community. So having a community that can actually journey together with you and grow together with you. And then the third is the opportunity to both grow and serve. So some places, you go there, you feel like everybody's doing everything already and you don't really have a opportunity to serve. And then some areas there are just needs everywhere and you feel like you have to fill in all the gaps, and then you don't get that chance for people to input in your life as much. So having a good balance of all three things is really, really ideal when choosing a church for me. Yeah,
but I would say I don't think they have. I've never seen one there are very few that can hit that mark.
Yeah, it's a bit of a triangle of death.
Yeah, but also because when we say faithful preaching, right? I have this naggy feeling that that definition might differ to certain communities.
Okay.
So for one is expository preaching. The other one is when I hear the pastor preach, right? I really feel the presence of God, and I really feel God ministering to me. And I'm not going to discount both as non-faithful, in a sense. Yeah. Other than that, I want to add also that how it's interesting. I was complaining to Yamping, and I foresee this happening again when they hear I came from a Pentecostal church. Their first thought is trying to box me into certain things that will make me Pentecostal, but without sitting with me to hear where my conviction lies, right? And if you really ask me what's my stance, I think I have come to the clear conviction now to say I am just Christian. Yeah. And if you find me faithful to the word, good. Don't have to call me anything else other than faithful to the word. That's one thing, yeah. And I can remember Yamping says, yeah, Adriel, actually for you, right? It's not about which right? It's not about which denomination. It's as long as the people there love you, you're happy enough already. And I thought about it, I said, yeah, that's true. So it doesn't, for me, it doesn't matter where I'm at. So like Yamping and I, we are both complementarian. And to give context, complementarian is a biblical view of how the role of men and women are of equal status and value, but with different roles as appointed by God within scriptures. And how that plays out will be very different. But both of us can exist in an egalitarian church whatsoever. Like if a woman comes up to preach, right, we will have our stance, but we won't make a ruckus out of it. And I'm not dismissing its importance, right? I'm just saying somehow the way we want to dispense our grace in certain areas, these are the places we choose to dispense our grace. Yeah.
So based on all the things that we talked about in processing choosing a church, we kind of have chosen a church now. How would you land this church?
Okay, so I'm going to give my personal thoughts, right? And this is where the title from Pentecostal to Presbyterian comes in, right? So as the hint goes, we have decided to settle down in a Presbyterian church. Now, so one of the many reasons why we decided to settle down on an honest reason is that I think the church had more elderly people. Now, why I was able to settle down. Now, I had an inkling purpose. Might cut this out, but I almost purposely forced myself to either choose a church where most of the students are at because of the nature of my work, or choose a church where it is only Mandarin speaking because I need to buck up on my Mandarin, or purposely choose a Bahasa speaking church because
So very big on the serving element.
Correct, and very ministry minded. And I felt that might have caused me to miss out certain points on why I'm supposed to be part of the body. And so having a more elderly setting allows me to be actually ministered to rather than to minister, because it's a habit of a work hazard when I see younger people, I just really put on my ministry hat and focus on discipleship straight away, intentional discipleship. So it was nice to settle in, because then you get these older people who will check in on you and just bring you out for lunch, and just spend time with you, and just listen to you and ask you how you're doing, rather than the other way around. So that was why I was choosing to settle that. Do you have anything to add, or why you then settled with the church?
Yeah, I think back to the 3 principles, right? A lot of it has to do with the season that you're in. Because ideally, if you found a church with all 3, it might be a very flourishing church, and you might want to look elsewhere to help serve other needs. But depending on the season that you're in, and I felt like the season that we are in, we just moved to a new place. A lot of your work is ministry focused, and you'll be giving a lot. We're talking about him. So I did have a preference for a community where we didn't have to feel like we also had to give a lot on Sundays, in church. Rather have a more capacity to receive.
For now,
Yeah. So I think that's how we landed with that church, apart from the fact that it's just a really nice community, and we really like the the preaching of the word, the worship was very ministering for me. And even though there are a lot of other good churches out there, this was one of the first few that we tried out. So, okay, let's just stick to it.
So here's my question to you. Will you eventually find an opportunity to serve in a church?
Yeah.
And what's the timeline you gave yourself, considering that this was the season that you explained?
Yeah, usually when I move to a new place, my sort of rule of thumb is 6 months. Yeah. Just for a settling phase. And that has happened when I, moved back to Malaysia. I told the same thing to a pastor. When I got married and moved to your church, I told the same thing to a lot of the ministry people.
Yeah. And so to recap, I think for those who are tuning in, I think for us, it is very contextual to see where both of us are at the season. But what we considered was the faithful preaching of the word, a loving community, and a place to serve. And just to make sure that we don't say that other churches have no places to serve, I think the moment you're part of a church, right, there will always be needs to be met. In fact, the reality is sometimes there are not enough churches and there are not enough pastors. And that's something that we do realize within the context of Johor as well. I mean, not to take any pot shots, right? But we do hear of narratives that everyone's trying to rush into Klang Valley and just build the church there. And sometimes I do wonder, that the challenge is, instead of building God's kingdom, is building the brand name lah. Yeah. So siapa makan cili dia terasa pedas, because I'm not going to go any further than that mah. But it's if you terasa the pedas, okay, I think it is a good chance for you not to shoot me, but to reflect on whether that's the case lah. Yeah. And then ultimately your fruits will show for itself lah.
Or I don't know about fruits will show for itself, because sometimes we are called not to bear fruit in numbers or impact, and just be faithful, like how Jesus only had 12.
Yeah.
I think that would be a failed church in today's day and age, right?
Yeah. No, Jesus had 12 disciples lah, but eventually he had 12 apostles, 500 disciples. But yeah. But yeah, from the eyes of the people whom he chosen also were so-called not bercaliber and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
That
Alright.
was quite a interesting thought process, sharing through how we chose our church.
Yeah. And the next episode, we'll be playing the fellowship game together. Yeah. Okay, I wish I had the fellowship game in my hands right now, but it's a conversational game card for Christians. And next week we're going to try it in the couples edition mode. Yeah, just to help hear what are the questions that Christians might ask and how we would answer them. So don't forget to tune in. But that's it for now.
This is the Teo-logy podcast.
Till next time. Bye-bye.